I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who would sit in front of a camera, pouring out every piece of my heart like it was some confessional booth. But here I am. My name is Amara Collins. I'm 36 years old, and this is the story. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, a place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets floated in the air like incense smoke at Sunday service. I was the quiet one in the family, the one who preferred to stay behind after dinner, washing dishes, rather than gossiping at the table. My sister Selena was the opposite, radiant, charismatic, the type of woman whose laughter could fill an entire room and make people feel alive. She was 2 years older than me, and for most of my life, she was my idol. But idolization is a dangerous thing. It blinds you to the cracks in someone's soul and makes you believe they are incapable of cruelty. Selena wasn't just my sister. She was my confidant, my protector. At 27, I fell in love. His name was Jordan Hayes, a man with eyes as deep as storm clouds and a voice that could calm every fear I'd ever carried. He wasn't wealthy. He worked long days at an auto repair shop, his hands rough and calloused, but he carried himself with a quiet strength that made me feel safe. Our love wasn't fireworks. It was a slow burn, like a candle that glowed steadily, chasing shadows away from the corners of my life. My family disapproved. My father, stern and pragmatic, called Jordan a man with no ladder to climb. My mother, ever concerned with appearances, whispered that if I stayed with him, I'd always be the poor sister, while Selena dazzled with her handsome, successful boyfriends. And Selena herself? She smiled, patted my arm, and told me that love was a gamble, but I should be careful what I was betting with. At the time, I thought she was only looking out for me. I didn't listen to any of them. For the first time, I chose something for myself. I married Jordan, despite the protest, and though the wedding was small and quiet, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. A year later, I gave birth to my son, Elijah. The moment they placed him in my arms, something shifted inside me. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I swore I would protect him no matter what. I didn't care if the world judged me for marrying beneath my station. I didn't care if my parents looked at me with disappointment. I had my little family, and that was enough. But fate has a cruel way of laughing at our promises. Jordan died in an accident when Elijah was just 2 years old. I remember the knock at the door, the way the world spun as the words sank in, the silence that followed like a cavern swallowing me whole. In an instant, I became a widow, a single mother, and a woman carrying unbearable grief. It was during this time that Selena stepped back into my life in a way she hadn't for years. She came to my house often, bringing groceries, cooking meals, cradling Elijah in her arms as if he were her own. "You need help, Amara," she said softly, her eyes full of sympathy. "You're too young to bury yourself in sorrow. Let me take care of you." And I believed her. For months, I leaned on her. She soothed my tears, babysat Elijah when I had to work extra shifts, even paid for his medicine when he fell sick. People in town praised her for being such a devoted sister, and I praised her too. But my dependents wove a net around me, a net she would later pull tight until I couldn't breathe. The first crack appeared one night when I came home early. I heard Elijah laughing in the living room, but then I heard Selena's voice, low and coaxing. "Say it again, sweetie. Who's your mama?" There was a pause. Then Elijah's little voice chirped, "You, Mama!" followed by Selena's delighted laugh. I froze. My body went cold as if someone had poured ice water into my veins. I stepped into the room, my voice shaking. "What are you doing?" Selena shrugged. "It's just a game. Don't be so serious, Amara. Kids don't know what they're saying." But I did. I knew. From then on, I noticed small things. The way Selena introduced herself at the clinic when she took Elijah for checkups, speaking as though she were the mother. The way she corrected him gently when he called me Mama in front of her, whispering, "No, I'm Mama Selena." The way neighbors sometimes looked at us strangely, unsure who he belonged to. When I confronted her, she laughed. "You're imagining things. You're too stressed. Trust me." And I did, against every instinct screaming inside me. But the betrayal came into full bloom on Elijah's 4th birthday. I had decorated the house with balloons, baked a cake myself. Selena arrived early, dressed beautifully as always, and whispered in Elijah's ear. Later, when the candles were lit and I asked him to blow them out, he turned to her and said, "Mama, help me." Everyone went silent. The candles flickered, wax dripping onto frosting as the world blurred. My heart cracked open, and Selena, my sister, my idol, my betrayer, just smiled and leaned in to blow with him. That night when the guests had left, I confronted her. "Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to take what's mine?" She didn't deny it. She looked me in the eye and said, "Because you don't deserve him, Amara. You're weak. You cling to him like he's your lifeline, but he needs more than grief and desperation. He needs someone strong. He needs me." Her words cut deeper than any knife. I screamed. I begged. I threatened. But she only stood there, calm, unshaken, as if she had already won. And in some ways, she had. My parents sided with her. They said it was better for Elijah to be with Selena, who had stability, money, confidence. They told me to think of his future, not my pride. They didn't see how my heart was being carved out of my chest. They didn't hear Elijah's cries of confusion. They didn't feel the emptiness that spread through me every night I lay awake, wondering if my son would one day forget my face. And then, one day, he did. He called me Auntie Amara. That was when I realized I wasn't just fighting for recognition. I was fighting for my child's soul. I had no plan, only a storm raging inside me. Revenge simmered under the surface of my grief. One thing was certain. Selena had taken everything from me, and I would make sure she paid for it. The anger that rose in me after that night was not the loud, cinematic kind you see in movies. It was quieter, colder, a slow-burning coal that settled under my ribs and refused to die. For days I moved through the house like a ghost, smiling when guests came, nodding when neighbors asked about Elijah. But inside, something had shifted into a steady, ruthless focus. I stopped asking myself whether I could get my child back and started asking instead how I would make Selena regret the day she chose to eat my heart. Revenge became the logic that kept me standing, not because I wanted to hurt her for the sake of cruelty, but because I needed to reclaim my right to be his mother, to restore the small sacred piece of my life that had been stolen. I began with observation. If Selena had started this quietly, I would match her hush with patience. I watched her routines, learned the cadence of her days, where she kept her keys, what time she took Elijah to the clinic, who in town she leaned on. It wasn't glamorous work. It involved sitting on a bench outside the grocery, pretending to scroll through my phone, or lingering at the preschool gate long after other parents had left, just to see how she carried herself. I watched her at the coffee shop, at the Sunday market, at church. The more I watched, the more I learned. She loved the stage of being perfect. She thrived in appearances. That was the weakness I decided to use. But observation alone would not win a child back. I needed proof, something that would force people to look at facts rather than the performance she put on for them. I started collecting small pieces, photographs of me holding Elijah in the hospital, immunization records with my name scrawled across the forms, bills with my signature. I dug through boxes in the attic, through notebooks where I had written appointment times, and the past revealed itself in fragments. A midwife's note tucked into an envelope, a faded receipt for baby clothes, a neighbor's thank you card that said, "You're such a devoted mother, Amara." Each piece was a stitch in the truth I was slowly sewing back together. At the clinic, the staff were hesitant. "Selena's been here before," they said, with polite smiles, as if that should settle everything. But a night nurse who remembered my delivery pulled me aside. She said, "I'll never forget you, holding that baby like the world would shatter if you let go." She gave me the phone number of an older midwife who kept her own notes. Midwives, I learned, are archivists of truth. That woman's handwriting saved me. In her notebook, under my name, were the words, "Delivery, single mother, Baby boy, healthy. It wasn't an official certificate, but it was undeniable proof. I photocopied it and carried it with me like an amulet. And then came the discovery that shattered me anew. In my parents' attic, hidden in a box, I found a ribbon-bound stack of letters addressed to Selena. They were from a man whose name I didn't recognize. They spoke of debts, promises of escape, and, chillingly, of doing the right thing for the child. My hands trembled as I read them. I took the letters to my mother, and her face went pale. She confessed. Years ago, Selena had been pregnant by a married man. The child had been given away. Everything suddenly made sense. She had lost her child, buried the truth, and when she saw Elijah, my Elijah, she saw a chance to fill that void. It explained her obsession, her desperation. But understanding her hunger didn't make me less furious. If anything, it made my resolve harder. I knew gossip and faded receipts weren't enough. I needed the kind of evidence no one could dismiss. DNA. I saved every dollar I could from long hours at the shop, borrowed money from a friend who believed in me, and finally took Elijah to the city clinic. The test was clinical, sterile, but the result was everything. 99.999% probability I was his mother. It was science. It was fact. I gathered everything. The midwife's note, the DNA results, the receipts, the photographs, and went to see a community elder, a woman respected by everyone in town. She listened, brows knitted, and finally said, "Amara, you must take this to court. Let truth do the work." The idea terrified me. Taking my own sister to court felt like shattering what was left of our family, but the fear of losing Elijah forever was stronger. I contacted a lawyer, humble and kind, who told me plainly, "Biology will help, but the court wants to see stability. Show them you are the mother in every way that matters." So I began building a case. I rented a small apartment closer to Elijah's school. I kept records of every bedtime story, every doctor's visit, every meal I cooked for him. I worked long hours, pinching pennies to pay legal fees. Each night, as I tucked him in, I whispered a promise. "Mama's fighting for you." The hearing came. The courtroom was full, neighbors curious, relatives tense. Selena looked immaculate, poised as always. She spoke first, her voice honeyed. "I've been there for Elijah when Amara was lost in grief. I gave him stability, love, safety." People nodded, swayed by her polish. When it was my turn, I didn't try to match her performance. I spoke simply. I told them about the night Elijah was born, the way he clutched my finger, the nights I prayed over his fever, the mornings I carried him to school. I placed the DNA report, the midwife's note, and the documents on the judge's table. "I may not be wealthy," I said, "but I am his mother. That is a bond no one can steal." The judge listened, expression unreadable. The room was silent. She said she would review the evidence. Weeks later, the letter came. I tore it open with shaking hands. Custody. Granted to Amara Collins. I sank to the floor, clutching Elijah, sobbing into his hair. My son was mine again. Selena's fury was volcanic. She stormed to my door, eyes blazing. "You've destroyed me," she hissed. I looked at her, hollow and exhausted. "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself." But even as I said it, my chest ached. Winning didn't erase the scars. It didn't erase the memory of Elijah calling me auntie. It didn't erase the sleepless nights of doubt. I had won. But something told me this story wasn't over. Victory didn't feel like I thought it would. The moment the court declared me Elijah's mother, as though I'd ever stopped being one, I expected to feel triumphant, to feel a rush of vindication. Instead, I felt exhausted, emptied out, as if I had poured every last drop of strength into that battle and had nothing left for myself. But life didn't pause. Elijah needed dinner. The rent needed paying. I had to keep showing up to work. And in the middle of all that, there was still Selena. She didn't vanish after the ruling. She still lived in town, still carried herself with that same air of authority, but her shine had dulled. People who once praised her whispered now. She still had friends, of course, but the admiration she had basked in all her life had cracked. And then just as suddenly as she had stormed into my world to take what was mine, Selena began to fade. At first I thought it was bitterness, the way she moved more slowly, the way her face looked hollow, her cheeks sunken. But soon it became clear. She was sick, very sick. Our mother was the one who told me first, her voice low on the phone. "She's not well, Amara. Will you come?" My instinct was to refuse. The scars she left on me were still fresh. But something inside me, maybe guilt, maybe duty, maybe that invisible chain that ties sisters together no matter how jagged, made me go. I remember standing in her room that first day, the curtains drawn, the air heavy with medicine. Selena lay on the bed, smaller than I'd ever seen her. When her eyes fluttered open and landed on me, I braced for venom. Instead, she whispered my name. Amara. Just that. I stood there, stiff, my hands clenched. 100 things I wanted to say choked in my throat. How dare you? You ruined me. You made my son forget me. But when I looked at her, pale and broken, I said only, "I'm here." The visits became a pattern. I told myself I was going for our parents' sake, for Elijah's sake. But deep down, I think I was going because some part of me still wanted to understand her. She didn't speak much at first, but little by little, the words came. One evening, her voice cracked as she confessed. "I thought Elijah was my second chance. After what I lost, after what was taken from me." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her temples. "I wanted to fill the hole inside me, Amara. I didn't think about what it would do to you." Her honesty cut me deeper than her lies ever had, because I could hear the truth in it. And truth is always heavier than deception. Still, it didn't undo the damage. Nothing ever could. Weeks passed. Her body weakened, her hair thinned, her laughter disappeared altogether. And then one day, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Can I see Elijah?" The panic that surged in me was almost primal. My son was finally mine again, fully, legally, emotionally. How could I risk opening that wound? But when I looked at her, frail and desperate, I knew she didn't have long. Against every instinct, I agreed. I kept Elijah close that day. He stepped into her room cautiously, his little hand clutching mine. Selena smiled weakly, raising a trembling hand. "Hi, sweet boy." Elijah looked at me, uncertain. I nodded. He moved closer, touching her hand gently. "Hi, Auntie." "Not Mom. Auntie." The word was everything. Selena broke down, sobbing so hard her frail body shook. Elijah looked up at me confused. I gave him a soft smile, though tears blurred my vision. In that moment, justice was no longer a paper signed by a judge. It was the truth spoken from my son's lips. He knew. Deep down, he had always known. Selena died months later. It wasn't dramatic. No big speeches, no shocking twists. Just a slow unraveling. On her last night, I sat beside her. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes glassy. She reached for my hand, her grip barely there. "Take care of him," she whispered. "Don't let him forget me completely." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "He won't forget," I said softly. "But he'll always know I'm his mother." A faint smile touched her lips. "Good. That's how it should be." Chapter 12. Those were her last words. The funeral was subdued. People came out of habit, out of obligation. Some cried, some didn't. I stood with Elijah at my side, his small hand gripping mine as the casket lowered into the earth. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vengeance. I felt sorrow for the sister I once adored, for the family we could have been, for the years devoured by lies. After the funeral, whispers faded. People looked at me differently now. Some with sympathy, some with respect, some with shame for ever doubting me. But their opinions no longer mattered. I had my son. I had the truth. That was enough. And yet, healing wasn't immediate. Night still came when I lay awake, haunted by memories of Elijah calling her mama. The scars didn't vanish just because the battle was over, but little by little, Elijah's laughter began to drown out the echoes of pain. His arms around my neck, his sleepy, "Good night, Mama," became the balm I needed. One night, Elijah asked me, "Mama, why was Auntie Selena so sad?" I froze. How could I explain the tangled mess of jealousy, grief, and desperation to a child? I stroked his hair and answered, "Sometimes people carry hurts they don't know how to heal. Auntie made mistakes, but she did love you, in her own way. What matters is that you know I'll always be your mama." He nodded, satisfied, and just like that, the conversation was over for him. For me, it was another piece of healing, but I knew the journey wasn't done yet. After the funeral, there was silence. Not the heavy silence of grief that used to sit on my chest like a weight, but a quieter one, the kind that leaves room for breath. For the first time in years, I didn't have to look over my shoulder, wondering if someone was trying to take my son away from me. For the first time, I could simply live. But healing is never simple. In the weeks that followed, I found myself drifting between relief and guilt. Relief that the nightmare was finally over. Guilt that some part of me had wanted Selena to suffer for what she did. And she had. I carried both feelings like stones in my pockets, weighing me down when I thought I should feel light. Elijah, though, was my anchor. He was only 5 then, but children have a way of carrying wisdom beyond their years. His laughter filled the house again. His little drawings of us, stick figures holding hands, big smiles across our faces, reminded me of what mattered. Each time he shouted, "Mama!" when I picked him up from school, it stitched another piece of my broken heart back together. Still, late at night, I would sit by the window and think about everything that had happened, about the little girl I had once been, looking up to her big sister, about how idolization had blinded me to the cracks in Selena's soul, about how betrayal never comes from strangers. I would think about the moment Elijah first called me Auntie, and how that wound had nearly destroyed me. And I would think about Selena's last words, "Don't let him forget me completely." What does it mean to remember someone who hurt you? What does it mean to honor truth without passing down bitterness? I decided then that Elijah would grow up knowing the truth, but not the poison. He would know his aunt made mistakes, that she tried to be something she wasn't, but he would also know she loved him in her own broken way. I wanted him to grow up free, not carrying the burden of my anger, not shackled to the bitterness that had nearly consumed me. Life slowly returned to rhythm. I worked, I cooked, I tucked Elijah into bed. Weekends were spent at the park, chasing him through the grass, his laughter ringing out like freedom itself. There were hard days, too, bills piling up, exhaustion gnawing at me. But even those struggles felt different now. They were mine. Mine to face, mine to endure, mine to overcome. And there was power in that. As Elisha grew older, I began to share pieces of our story with him. Not all at once, not in a flood that would drown him, but in small drops he could hold. When he was 7, he asked me why people sometimes looked at us strangely when we walked through town. I told him, because they remember things that happened when you were little. But what matters is that we know the truth, he nodded, thoughtful, and went back to building his Lego tower. Watching him thrive, I realized something profound. The revenge I had carried in my heart all those years wasn't really about punishing Selena. It was about reclaiming him, about ensuring that no one could rewrite our bond, no matter how convincing their lies. In the end, the sweetest revenge wasn't her downfall. It was the life Elijah and I built together, strong and unshakable. But even that felt incomplete until I learned how to let go. Forgiveness is a word people throw around too easily, as if it's just a choice you make once and then you're free. It's not like that. Forgiveness is a process. It's waking up every day and deciding not to carry the hate. It's choosing to remember the truth without letting it poison you. It's letting the wound scar over instead of picking at it. I didn't forgive Selena for her sake. She never asked for it. I forgave her because carrying her betrayal inside me was like drinking poison every day. I forgave her because Elijah deserved a mother who wasn't consumed by rage. I forgave her because I deserved peace. Now, years later, Elijah is 10. He has his father's mischievous smile and, I like to think, my stubborn heart. He still climbs into my lap sometimes, even though he's getting big for it, and wraps his arms around my neck. He calls me Mama with pride, and every time he does, I remember how close I came to losing that word. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still hear Selena's voice in my head. He needs me. And I answer her in my heart, no, he needed me, and I was strong enough to fight for him. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that family can be both our greatest comfort and our deepest wound. That betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from blood. That justice doesn't always feel like victory. And that forgiveness, not for them, but for ourselves, is the only way to survive. Because hate is heavy. It anchors you to your pain and keeps you from moving forward. But love, even bruised and scarred, is stronger. It's what pulled me out of despair, what gave me the strength to fight, what allowed me to build a new life. So if you're listening to this and you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. You can reclaim what's yours. You can survive the lies, and one day, you can lay the burden down and breathe free again. If you've listened this far, thank you for staying with me through the hardest story I've ever had to tell. Maybe my pain will remind someone out there that even in the face of betrayal so deep it cuts into your soul, you can still reclaim your truth. You can still choose love over lies, forgiveness over hate. If my story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell me your story, your lessons, your survival. We heal when we speak, when we listen, when we remember we are not alone.